Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack. Back again to go over all the healer changes that they just posted post Race to World First on March 21st. Starting off, Preservation, funny enough, has their Nerebar Palace tier set being nerfed because it was too strong. Their 4 set, increasing the healing of their Empower spells, is now only 5% a stack instead of 10%. Glad that in the third week we got that. But Prez gets a 5% healing buff across the board. Spirit Bloom gets its healing buff for 20%, which is great since that's a huge function of Preservation's healing in a 5-man environment with the Chrono Warden cooldown reduction. That's cool. Still feel like Prez is like a ton of work in a dungeon environment. The rest of the changes kind of help its damage. You have less of a mana cost to Living Flame, thanks to Energizing Flame. Disintegrate has its damage increased by 25%. Living Flame damage increased by 25%. That stuff's awesome. That being said, Prez pretty consistently felt like it was just a ton of work to produce good output. It did have like a good ceiling to its output whenever I was testing in PTR, but I feel like this is about as much of a band-aid as they can really put on mid-season for the spec. And yay, that's pretty cool because it was kind of just middle of the pack when it came to like rating. Notably, it fell off super hard after 30-man. Everybody was like glazing about it super hard in like 30-man raids, and then you just see 3 Mistweavers. So nice at least that they're getting some kind of healing buffs to kind of juice them up a little bit because they notably were completely absent in high-end rating. That what was not absent was Mistweaver Monk. Of course, they're decreasing Mistweaver's overall damage because it was really, really insane. I missed it. Yeah. Mistweaver's damage right now, as it stands, kind of ridiculous. For all healers, it was over here. Yeah, it was over here in terms of its overall damage. But bringing down the damage by 25% isn't really something that's super insane. It still does insanely high damage, as does Dispriest, of course, thanks to PI and all the passive damage it deals. So those 2 specs are still super insanely high when it comes to the overall damage contribution. If, like, Race continued tomorrow or something, I wouldn't be surprised if Mistweaver was still just stacked a bunch because of how flexible they can be. And they are also keeping Jadefire teachings really strong as well, so it doesn't look like they're trying to like gun down this Jadefire teaching setup, which is also really helpful for 5-man Monk. So yeah, in 5-mans, your damage is going to be a little bit worse and stuff, but as long as it's not coming at the cost of your Jadefire teachings, that kind of seems like it's going to be fine. And I think the spec's still going to be blasting in a 5-man environment. Spinning Crane Kick damage was increased by 15%. A lot of the 11.1 revamps were kind of focused on making sure that Spinning Crane Kick was good. Awakened Jadefire, which synergizes with it, where your damage from Spinning Crane turns into healing. They buffed that again since 11.1. I think the main problem with it, though, was the fact that it actually wasn't juicing up your vitality when you play Master of Harmony. So I'm not sure if these changes have addressed that at all. And it might just be if you're still playing Master of Harmony that you wouldn't Spinning Crane Kick until you had like insane high target counts or something. But there you go. Now, Holy Paladin. Oh my god, there's actually buffs for Holy Paladin. And they buff Spenders again, crazy enough. So all healing increased by 3% and a 20% buff to Word of Glory, Eternal Flame, and Light of Dawn. So I think in total people were saying it was like 8 or 9% in terms of its overall healing that you're getting out of this, which is nice. Holy Prism AoE healing and damage increased by an additional 30%. You know, nice. But Holy Prism is not nearly as good as it was in, like, what was it, Aberrus, where it had that tier set synergy, and it was just, like, a huge single target burst into people. Holy Prism's single target healing has been increased by an additional 50%, so that might try to help sort of bring it closer. But I still think the spec in general has this sort of, like, glut of resources where everything feels kind of mediocre. When it comes to that overall healing that we were talking about before, Paladin was absolutely the worst by a very, very long shot. Now, they're getting buffs. We'll talk about Holy Priest buffs in a second because I know they're lagging behind. Prez obviously was lagging behind as well going into it. But it still really feels pretty disappointing with the spec. And I would really expect to see some kind of revamp coming into Holy Pally in the 0.5 patch or hopefully like 0.7 patch or something like that. Because they've been sitting in this like get turbo glutted with resources that don't really feel that good. So glad they're making Spenders better, but it feels like it's just kind of slapping a band-aid on and like kind of doing what they can in the short term rather than having like a long-term solution, at least, you know, at the moment. Speaking of other band-aids, Holy Priest getting more band-aids going into it. Our aim with this Holy Priest tuning is increasing healing from weaker spells and talents and tuning up Oracle to improve its viability. So Prayer of Healing increased by 25%. We were looking at this on stream, so be sure to like and subscribe as well. Prayer of Healing is up here, and it's doing 223% of spell power at 5.5% mana cost. Sanctify costs 3.5% of your mana and does about double the healing that Prayer of Healing does. So you could take Prayer of Healing, you could take Resonant Words for a 40% buff, you could take Light Weaver for a 30% buff, or actually, excuse me, for an 18% buff. You could have Renew Talents and stuff on to increase its healing as well, and it still really sucks. It'd be like spamming a weaker Sanctify while all your mana gets burned away. It's not the solution that Holy Priest needs to actually do like good AoE healing in a 5-man environment. And I'd be kind of surprised if they took away talent points for like a raid type build, since the spot healing already was really strong already. I'll keep you guys posted on that stuff. But I still kind of think Prayer of Healing, bad ability. Prayer of Mending, pretty nice. Actually, this Prayer of Mending's been really bad since it's been sliding since Dragonflight and getting like kind of more and more mediocre. So I'm glad they're buffing that. Renew Healing. This is actually a big one. The base Renew Healing has been increased by 60%. We're going to jump around a little bit, but we'll come back. Renewed Faith increases your healing done to your allies by 10% instead of 6%. Renews from Empowered Renew, that's the casted Renew, now heals for 120% more than a normal Renew. So baseline Renew gets buffed, and the casted Renews are 120% stronger. And if you're going into Oracle, that increases the duration of Renew by 40%, so it's even longer. And then they've made increases to the healing out of Prayer of Mending, increases damage to your Smite, Holy Fire, and Holy Nova. So I don't think this is going to solve all the problems for Holy Priest in a 5-man environment, but this goes pretty far in terms of helping you actually get to put out renews on people that do decent healing and mark them to do good healing as well. So we might be looking at an Oracle angle for 5-mans for the spec. A lot of the thought behind like playing Archon this season at the start was, since you were playing like an empowered form, Archon benefiting your empowered form and Apotheosis uptime was helping you spread around more of your insurance buffs. But what a lot of these changes do is they start helping your healing outside of your Apotheosis, which is really big because the spec sucked outside of Apotheosis. A big reason why the spec can do well in raids is they can just stack a bunch of modifiers and blast tons of healing during their Apotheosis window, Halo window, like all that fun stuff. But outside of it, you didn't really do too much. That works pretty well in raids when you have multiple other healers to work with. You can kind of just cycle and spread out your cooldowns, have a great time. But in a dungeon environment, being very cooldown dependent is super bad. And Holy Priest's usual sort of like identity of doing good steady healing was pretty at odds at the start of this season, since most of your juice was really coming in Apotheosis windows. Now you can play Oracle and you can actually be in pretty good shape long term, spread around renews, do more healing to allies with renews, all that fun stuff. Now I didn't forget about the other things. Lightwell, this actually works pretty well. Lightwell is not super powerful or anything along those lines, but when it comes to your talent setup, you kind of had this like free floating talent point right here. That like Lightwell was fine for, but not that great. So you could just drop it into Lightwell now. It also is applying renews, which are now also going to be doing more healing to your allies. Which are doing more healing to your allies thanks to Renewed Faith, just doing more healing in general. So it actually makes Lightwell feel like a little bit better of a cooldown when it comes to a dungeon environment. We'll see about a raid environment though. Because Divine Image, oh my god, it's so strong. Thanks for the subs. Divine Image healing has been increased by 20%, and the damage increased by 20%. This is already doing like 8 or 9% of your overall healing, and they just made that better for reasons. So, kind of crazy. Would be cool to see Oracle be like more viable for raids. I kind of would still expect to see more Archon gameplay, especially with the synergy between extending the duration of your Apotheosis and Archon giving you cooldown reduction for your Sanctify. That stuff's like super insanely powerful. So I feel like it makes Oracle a little bit better in raids, but I'd be looking to play it probably more in M+. Lol, Shadow Priest got nerfed. Disc, Lenience, your damage reduction. Now causes Atonement to reduce damage taken by 2% instead of the 3% they had before. Cool. I kind of hope that they would just outright remove lenience in general. That would probably be my preference long term. Getting some kind of like different talent or some variety instead. So I don't really feel too bad about this. It's still super insanely valuable. You're almost certainly are still taking it for all content. Atonement is also now causing your spell damage to heal all targets for 32% of damage done instead of 35%. So it's a few percentage points of a nerf for a raid environment, but most of Disc's ramps in raids anyway were like pretty high in terms of your overheal. Some of my ramps on Sprocket, I'm overhealing by like 35%. And I don't have any other healer cooldowns going on. You know, my like highest ramp periods that I have right here, I'm overhealing by 28%. And so Piety is already kind of helping you with that redirect function anyway. And that's a huge reason why Oracle is so valuable for Disc anyway. So I really don't think this is a huge deal for a raiding environment at all. The spec still blasts, and it's more reason than ever, really, to just play Oracle. In a dungeon environment, I do think this is going to kind of knock us from being like the top dog, and I think it could give more value to like Druid, which didn't get any buffs, nerfs, or anything. Maybe to Monk. I still think this like lends a little bit more credibility to the theory that like Druid could be like the end game super powerful healer. Because keep in mind, yeah, we do 30%, 32% of our damage turning into Atonement. But in dungeons, we do 100% more on top of that. So it's a bit more of a hit for a dungeon environment than it is for like a raid environment. That being said, I still think Disc is like more than capable of getting 0.1% titles, still more capable than, you know, just blasting huge damage, huge healing, brings PI, lots of fun benefits. So it's not like Disc is going to be bad or anything, but I do think that Druid's got a lot of legs for like being like the top dog for the season. So we'll see. Lastly, we have Resto Shamans. This is funny. I learned this literally today. Somebody came in my chat and they're like, did you know that if you totemic projection your surging totem, it'll apply insurance again? And I was like, what? That's crazy. They fixed it, and they've also buffed the insurance healing to sort of compensate. So basically, they were like doubling these fuckers. They were doubling their insurance healing that they were getting from their foreset bonus as well. So kind of crazy. But I don't know if this is confirmed or not, or just some people yapping in some discords. But people were saying this is a larger nerf than any of the other healers are getting. And if so, that would be pretty on brand for Resto Shamans, which would be pretty messed up for them, unfortunately. Shaman in general, I mean, I feel like it's still a little unfortunate where the spec is at. Obviously, this isn't going to help them in a dungeon environment or anything like that. Thank you, Wound, for the 9 months, dude. You guys get to be featured in the video. Let's go. Yeah, obviously, you know, Shaman, notably kind of just mediocre in M+. Has been kind of lost in raids, and I don't think any of this stuff is going to be helping. So if there was a biggest loser when it comes to all these notes, I would say it's Resto Shaman. If there was a biggest winner when it comes to these notes, it's the people that didn't get any notes. It's those damn Druids. So watch out for Druid. It's on the rise. Disc still good. Monk still good. You know, probably buff Prez and Pally more. And Holy Priest. Yeah. All right. Be sure to like and subscribe. Thanks, patrons. And I'm going to go back to streaming. Yay.